always have a copy of your travel plans on you in physical format. Hey everybody, welcome to the Abroaders Travel Podcast, your weekly meetup with thousands of entrepreneurs, hustlers, creators, nomads, ninjas, wanderers, and world changers, all seeking to build the skills and connections to live a life without borders. If you want to learn more about what we do or download our entire podcast archive, check out the website, abroaders.com. Happy Wednesday morning and happy 2015. Welcome to another episode of the Abroaders Podcast. I am Erik, checking in with you from beautiful Salvador, Brazil. And today I'm going to be talking about what to do when something goes wrong with your travel plans. So when there's a delay or something gets screwed up with your ticket, the people that know how to handle those situations end up getting accommodated much easier and much faster. And so I'm going to share some tips with you guys to help you figure out how to manage those types of situations, and also share some learnings that I had from my award itinerary on my way down here to Salvador from Detroit, Michigan. So as you guys know, we do book tickets regularly for travelers as part of the Abroaders Premium service, and we monitor and reconfirm those flights before departure. But I didn't take our own medicine on this case. This was a trip that I booked for myself, so I didn't have our team do it. And because of that, it didn't go through the process of double checking and doing all the stuff that we normally do with award tickets. So I want to kind of share with you guys what I learned from this trip, and hopefully you guys can use that information to avoid getting into the situation that I found myself in when I arrived in Brazil just before New Year's. So to start out, I booked my flight to Salvador using Delta Sky Miles, and it was a pretty good award redemption. I spent 60,000 Sky Miles on a round trip and about $80 in taxes and fees. Now, as you guys may already know, Delta has just launched some huge changes to their program for 2015. And so now they are allowing one-way tickets at half the price of round trip, and they're no longer allowing stopovers. And we're probably going to do a full show on that coming up in the near future, because there's some pretty interesting and exciting changes with Delta. But when I booked my ticket, the round trip was required. And so what I did is I booked my return trip for late September, which was basically almost as far back as I could get in the booking calendar. And the reason that I did this is that I knew that I didn't have a really solid return date. It was just kind of an invented date because it had to be booked as part of the itinerary. And so when you don't think you're going to actually keep the date and you know you're going to want to make a change, it's advantageous to book as far out as possible. And the reason is because that gives more time for natural schedule changes to occur. So as you guys know, airlines have pretty complicated operations, and a lot of times they'll have to change the schedule, whether it's because, an aircraft had to undergo unscheduled maintenance or weather or other stuff like that. Sometimes those schedule changes can happen far out, and the ripple effects can screw things up. And so I was basically just betting on Delta having some sort of schedule change happen between now and September, and I was going to be able to get a free schedule change. However, I got to the airport in Detroit and realized that I had made a potentially pretty bad mistake, because Brazil requires a visa for U.S. citizens. And I've had my visa for quite a while now, and it's a 10-year tourist visa, but it only allows a rolling 180 days per year. And so that's not a calendar year. That's basically I get 180 days maximum in Brazil during any 365-day period. And so what happened is I got to the airport pretty late. I got there about an hour and 10 minutes before my scheduled departure, which is not a savvy traveler move for an international flight. Just for the record, international flights, at least in the US, have a 1 hour check-in cutoff, which means if you show up less than an hour before your flight, it's not possible to be on your flight. They are not going to let you check in. They're not going to let you check your bags, and you're in trouble. So I basically got there 10 minutes before that deadline. And one tip to share right now, I definitely don't like being the guy that tries to jump the line, but if you screw up and you show up to the airport late for whatever reason, don't be shy about going to the front of the premium passenger line, or at least getting in the first class line that generally is going to be really short, and asking one of the representatives to help you. And like I said, I highly recommend not trying to just run to the front of the economy line, because that's probably going to make a lot of people upset. But if you go to the priority check-in and talk to the first employee of the airline you're flying and explain your situation, they're generally going to walk you right up to somebody that can help. And so that was the case for me. I just basically ran up to the first class check-in and said, I'm so sorry, I'm running extremely late. I've only got an hour and a little bit more before takeoff. And the agent was able to help. He grabbed my passport and, informed me that I had like 5 minutes for this check-in to get processed. And so he starts typing frantically in the computer system. And that's when the trouble started, because what happened is he took a look at my visa and he took a look at the return itinerary, which was also on Delta. And he said, your visa is only good for 180 days. And so my response, which actually wasn't true at the time, is that I had another flight out of Brazil. In other words, I was leaving in December and my flight home was January. So that's 9 months. And he was saying, that doesn't work. Your visa is only good for 180 days. And I said, well, that's true, but I'm not going to be in Brazil the whole time. I'm planning to go to Argentina and Colombia. I have other flights that are already booked. So, I definitely won't be violating my visa. And the agent didn't have a problem with that. He believed me and I didn't have to prove that I had another flight, but he wasn't able to override that in the system. And so I'm sitting there kind of worrying that, that 5-minute clock is ticking and I'm afraid that if he doesn't get me checked in, I'm going to miss my flight. And fortunately, I had a pretty senior guy, which is another reason, that you want to go to that first class or business class check-in, because the senior agents are generally going to be serving the airline's most valuable customers. And so if you can get to that priority line, you're more likely to get somebody who knows the system well. And this guy realized that there was going to be a block on this, and that he called right away for a supervisor to help. And the supervisor was able to basically call the gate and tell them that I was at the airport and that they were checking me in, but that I might miss the cutoff deadline. So anyways, the key takeaway here, guys, is to not cut it close on international trips. It was a dumb thing for me to do. I got busy with some work at home and ended up taking off late. And you just don't want to cut it that close, because sometimes it can take a little bit more time to sort that out. I'm really glad that the guy, didn't ask for proof of that flight, because I might have had to, sort of cook something up or show him something on TripIt. So fortunately, I was able to get checked in and got myself through security and over to the gate. And this is the next thing I want to share with you guys, because I came up with a really, really useful trick that works a lot in the US to help you get improved seating on your flight. So this was an economy redemption. As I said, 60,000 miles round trip and $80. I didn't quite have enough miles. I think it was going to be 120,000 miles for a business class round trip. I didn't quite have enough Delta miles and didn't want to transfer any American Express points. So I was basically stuck in coach. And so when I booked my flight, the premium economy was selling for $109 on Delta's website, which is a pretty common thing. Delta does a really nice job of this, and a lot of other airlines offer this as well, where they will basically allow you to upgrade your reservation by paying a little bit of extra cash at the time of booking. And so instead of taking advantage of that $109 upgrade to premium economy, I just decided not to select a seat, and I didn't end up paying that extra fee. And so what I did when I got to the airport is I went straight to the gate agent and asked her if she could put me in an exit row. And the key here, honestly, is really simple. You just have to ask nicely. The people at the check-in gate the gate agents are generally a little bit stressed out. If there's a lot of passengers asking for stuff, sometimes people are causing problems. So if you just, as friendly as possible, always ask them how they're doing, and then say, hey, I don't have a seat assignment. I was wondering if it would be possible for you to put me in an exit row. And she just got on her computer, took a look, and was able to find an exit row seat. Another tip for this, if you have lounge access, is sometimes they're able to assign seats from the lounge, and the folks at the lounge are generally pretty good about trying to help you get the best seat that's available on the flight. So those are two things that you can use, but in general, like I said, the gate is the place to ask for this. And the reason that I bring this up is that on this flight, the exit row, at least the one the gate agent put me in, was actually in the premium economy section. So I ended up getting a bunch of extra amenities and free drinks and better food and a whole bunch more space that I would have normally had to pay for. And in fact, this is the really interesting thing, is that there was a guy that was trying to get moved from economy to premium economy. And he asked one of the crew members on the flight, if it was possible to change to premium economy. And they quoted him $160. So even more than they were charging online before. And this guy really wanted to sit in premium economy, and he ended up paying that $160. And so the difference was literally less than 100 meters. I asked the gate agent on the outside, and he waited until he got into the plane and asked one of the crew members, and he ended up paying $160 for the exact same seat. So keep that in mind. So one quick note before we get back to the rest of the trip review, I wanted to mention that on the route down, I wrote an entire mini course on the fastest way to earn miles. And so it includes 5 different lessons that are delivered by email, including pre-application credit review, how to improve your credit and check your credit, how to choose cards that are going to help you get to your travel destination and are going to be appropriate for the amount of money you're spending, and how to get applications approved via the reconsideration line. So I feel really, really good about the quality of the content. It's some of the most valuable information that we have pulled together from our own experiences and helping customers. So I highly encourage you guys to head over to abroaders.com and give us your email address to get the course for free. Okay, back to my trip to Brazil. So I arrived in Sao Paulo feeling pretty good about myself. I had traded Michigan winter for summer. I was about to enjoy an awesome time in Salvador, and I had secured myself a free upgrade on my trip. On top of that, I had a direct flight from Detroit to Sao Paulo, which is pretty rare. Usually I end up having to transit somewhere else in the US, and I only had a 2-hour and 30-minute layover before my trip to Salvador. So I was feeling really good when I got off the plane. I had my upcoming flight on Delta's partner airline, Gol, which is one of Brazil's major airlines and generally has routes to most of the big cities in Brazil. So I felt pretty good. I went and got my bags and went through passport control and customs, and then I got to the baggage recheck. And when I was in Detroit, I didn't have time because of the whole stress of getting checked in late. I wasn't able to get a boarding pass for Gol. And when I got there to recheck my bags, the people at the desk from Gol said that they did not have my record for the flight. They basically looked me up in the computer and said, well, we see you on your return flight from Salvador to Sao Paulo in September, but we don't have anything for you today, and you need to call Delta. And so the first thing that I did is showed them my reservation, because the last thing I wanted to do, I had just waited in line to recheck my bags, is to step out of line and call Delta and then have Delta tell me that I needed to talk to Gol. So one really key tip here is if something goes wrong, hold your ground at the counter. They're already helping you, and you don't need to do anything else if they tell you it's somebody else's responsibility. You want to try and hold your ground and stay where you're at. So what I did is I gave them a copy of my itinerary. And that's another really important thing. Always have a copy of your travel plans on you in physical format. I use TripIt Pro on my phone, which is an awesome service, and that's basically how I generally check things like what gate I'm supposed to be at, my flight numbers, departure time, stuff like that. But remember, your phone can run out of batteries. There's all kinds of stuff that can go wrong with that. So keep a paper copy. And I handed that paper copy to the agent, and they could see that I had a confirmed reservation on the 12:30 flight from Gol. And so what it looked like had happened is that a schedule change had occurred on the flight with Gol. And when that happened, it basically got lost in communication between the airlines. Gol continued to tell me that I needed to call Delta to get this completely squared away. But I kind of held my ground and asked them if there was any flight that they could put me on today. I said, look, you've got my reservation. Can you put me on a different flight? And they looked through it and they said, well, there is a flight later at 11:30 p.m. And so the first rule of thumb here is to try and get something that's going to work for you. That was definitely not the ideal situation. Sao Paulo is a terrible airport to do a layover. It's not close to the city, so you can't leave very easily, at least not without a very expensive cab ride. There's no good public transit to get downtown. And, there's just not good amenities at the airport. Food's not good. Lounges are not good. So I really wanted to avoid being stuck in Sao Paulo for 12 hours. But I did want to get this resolved, and I knew it was possible that I wasn't going to necessarily get any help from Delta. So I had Gol rebook me on this other flight as a temporary kind of worst case scenario. The next thing I did is I did step out of line and made some phone calls. First thing I did is I called Chase, which is the bank that issues the credit card I used to purchase my trip. So I bought my ticket on my Chase Sapphire Preferred card. And remember, this is an award ticket, so I only paid $80 for my flight, But even if it's just $80, you're still protected by your credit card insurance. So credit cards generally come with trip protection. So that'll be things like delays and cancellations and interruption. They have rules that basically entitle you to compensation if something comes up like what happened to me. And so I called Chase, and what they explained to me was that they will cover hotels and other expenses up to, I think, $200 for 12-hour delays or more. And unfortunately, the flight I had just rebooked myself on was only 11 and a half hours. So the other thing I asked about, and this is important to know, is that delay insurance does not compensate you for buying another plane ticket. Because that was another thing I was looking into. Gold did have empty seats on the next flight out, which was at 3:20. But they weren't able to change my reservation to that because of some restrictions on the Delta ticket. The award ticket, they couldn't just put me in any empty seat. And so they did offer to sell me that ticket, and it was going to be over $1,000 US. So I knew I wasn't going to buy that for $1,000, and I knew it wasn't covered by my Chase credit card insurance. So the next move is I ended up calling Delta. And in a situation like this, you want to call and you want to get put through to a supervisor probably as fast as possible. You can try it with the frontline agent, but most of the time when there's some sort of liaison experience going on between two different airlines, both airlines are going to tell you it's the other airline's responsibility to fix the problem. So Delta said I needed to go talk to the GOL ticket counter at the airport, and the people at the GOL ticket counter were saying that I needed to talk to Delta. Basically only Delta could change the ticket. And in this case, especially if you're in a foreign country, I speak fluent Portuguese, but if you don't have a grasp of the language, you want to stick with the U.S. carrier that you booked your ticket with. So you want to be having a conversation with Delta in this situation. They're the ones that were supposed to reconfirm your flight. And so in this case, I just basically stayed with them and continued to ask them to make changes. And eventually what they did is they changed my ticket from an award itinerary to just a partner booking. And so they essentially removed that restriction that it had to be an available award seat. And I was able to get on the 3:20 flight by just being persistent and staying on the phone and eventually talking to a Delta supervisor who was able to override those ticketing rules and basically said, look, I'm in an airport in Sao Paulo. I'm going to be stuck here for 12 hours. I really need to get to Salvador today, and there are open seats on this flight. I am sitting at the desk at the GOL ticket counter, and they're telling me that there are open seats on this flight, and I need to be on it. I need you to do whatever you can to please get me on this other flight. And that's what it eventually made it happen. Okay, so I was able to get my flight straightened out, but it would have been a lot easier if I would have followed a couple of simple rules. So let's talk about what you can do to prevent this type of situation from happening in the first place. The first thing you want to do is make sure you reconfirm your flights within 24 to 48 hours of departure. That means calling the airline who issued your award ticket and making sure that the schedule still works, that you've got enough time to connect and that all the flights are showing up on your itinerary. When you make that call, make sure you get the confirmation number or the record locator for any partner tickets. So there's two pieces of information that are really critical to looking up flights. One of them is your ticket number, and that's kind of an obnoxious 14-digit all numbers, and that's the number of your ticket, and that can usually be used to pull up your itinerary. But the other one is your record locator. And there's something really important you want to know about this. So when you book an award ticket, the airline that issued your points, so in my case, Delta, will give you a record locator. It's usually like an 8-character confirmation. And sometimes there's numbers, sometimes there's letters, but Delta has that and they can use it to look up your itinerary. That number does not translate to partners generally. So what that means is if you're asking GOL to look up the reservation, they have an entirely separate system of record locators. And if you give them a Delta record locator, they're not going to be able to do anything with it. So when you call Delta to reconfirm your flight, or rather when you call your issuing airline to reconfirm those flights, ask them to specifically give you the record locator for any partners. And they'll give you a separate 8-digit locator number. And that's what you're going to use if you have to talk to the partner airlines reservation desk at any point in time. Lastly, when you're working out these situations, do everything you can to stay calm and friendly and try and be patient, because your happiness totally depends on the people behind those desks doing everything in their power to work it out for you. You know, sometimes there are restrictions, sometimes it's truly not possible. Flights get overbooked, weather happens, things like that can't be changed. But your goal is to be friendly because you want the person there to do everything they can to help you. And so that's generally the best policy. The last thing is, don't forget that you're probably entitled to compensation. So in this case, when I was talking with Delta, and I actually mentioned the compensation issue when I specifically had my flight booked for 11 hours out, when they confirmed that really late flight early on in the process, I asked Delta to put a credit on my account. And so they issued me a voucher for $200 for the inconvenience of being delayed 12 hours. And then I was able to work it out with GOL and later with Delta to get the flight moved up to just a couple hour delay. But they had already put that compensation on my account and it stayed there. So that's a really good thing to keep in mind. So when the situation's looking especially dire, don't be afraid to ask for that compensation. Often they're going to be able to give you a gift card or a flight coupon that you can use for future flights. All right, so that's it for today. I hope you guys learned something there and are able to avoid some of the mistakes that I made and improve your chances of getting rebooked during irregular operations. Before signing off, I want to give you some quick information about Carnival. AJ and I are going to be in Salvador, Brazil this year, checking out the Carnival here. And now is the time to make those Carnival plans. If you're hoping to spend the week of February 12th to February 18th at one of the world's greatest parties, you need to make some moves now. Carnival is typically one of the most expensive times in Brazil, both for rent, for food, everything, all the prices go up. So if you're looking at a trip to Carnival, here's what you can expect. You're probably going to be looking at around $500 per person for a 5 to 8 day accommodation. The prices are just extremely high. Hotels tend to be very difficult. So a lot of times you're going to end up renting an apartment. And now is the time to try and get those plans nailed down because as the dates approach, everything fills up. So you're going to want to start looking at where you're going to stay. The other thing is you're going to want to start looking at flights now. There's definitely still some availability on some of the major airlines, especially to Sao Paulo and Rio. Salvador is a little bit more difficult to get to, but it's possible to fly to Rio or Sao Paulo and then book a paid flight up to Salvador. So keep that in mind. And then the last thing is in Salvador, you do have to pay to get into some of the parties. So unlike Rio, which is more of a street carnival, AJ and I did an episode last year reporting live from Carnival in Rio de Janeiro. And I'm pretty sure we mentioned that all of the parties are free, which is a really nice benefit. You basically can just go out in the street and take part in all the festivities. Salvador has a street carnival as well. But if you want to be inside the bloco, which is the processions, the parties that are sort of moving up and down the streets, you do have to pay for some of those. So that's something to look into as well. Prices can range anywhere from, $50 to $200 US. Some of them possibly even a little bit higher, but they're essentially all day parties. So you're looking at 7 or 8 hours of festivities and definitely can be worth it to check out the experience. So I hope you guys can make it down to Brazil. If you are looking at award tickets and need some help, send us an email, support@abroaders.com. And we look forward to talking with you guys next week. This week's International Jam is by Brazilian musical legend Tim Maia, or as the Brazilians call him, Chim Maia. And the song is called A Festa do Santo Reis. Perfect embodiment of the musicality and the happiness that you can find in Brazil. I hope we see some of you guys down here for Carnival. Until next time, we will see you 8 a.m. Eastern Standard next Wednesday. Until then, travel safe. Hey Brothers, don't be shy. Hop over to the website and join our email list for exclusive travel hacking content. If you like what we're up to, the best way you can support the show is by leaving us a 5-star review on iTunes. Lastly, we would love to hear from you, so send your show feedback to Erik or AJ at abroaders.com. We will see you next week.